Hi, and welcome to Making It on Monday. This is a weekly workshop for mums and dads in the making. And this week I'm talking all about period health and how periods are trying to tell you all about your fertility. Okay, so my name's Amy Forth. I'm the acupuncture pregnancy clinic director, and I have been an acupuncturist in the IVF and fertility space for about 15 years. And today I want to talk to you all about why Chinese medicine practitioners will ask you about your period, and also just give you some top tips of things you can do when you have your period that's going to be really good for your hormonal health and also really great for your fertility. Okay. So often you'll go into a Chinese medicine consult and they'll start asking you about your period, and you might be looking at the floor going, oh, why are you asking me this? But the reason why we're asking you is because the endometrial tissue, which is like the lining of the womb where the lovely embryo, whether you're trying to conceive naturally or trying to conceive through IVF, that's where it needs to make a home. And we want this endometrial tissue to be really well nourished. And there's a lot of research around, how the endometrial tissue is formed and what it looks like, especially around that sort of subendometrial, like the underneath layer. The nutrients it has, and also the blood flow and how spongy it is. There's all these things that really matter in terms of really good implantation, i.e. a pregnancy. So we want to ask you about your period when you come in for a Chinese medicine consult, because we want to know what is that endometrial tissue like? What's it like? So you might have a really light period, and that's to us indicating that potentially that endometrial tissue could be a little bit thin. And we might then be looking at maybe you need to have some investigations and have a look at what your estrogen levels are, because both the egg and also the endometrial tissues that are lining, they're both made up in the follicular phase from estrogen. And in Chinese medicine, we talk about the blood, and we talk a lot about the blood as being the quality of the blood and the hormone levels, the estrogen. And so if you're what we call blood deficient, you might have light periods, or the blood might be a little bit lighter in color. And that's really indicating that your period is a little bit blood deficient, that you might be a bit blood deficient. So you want to eat all those kind of really nourishing blood foods and get some herbs and acupuncture from your Chinese medicine practitioner, and they're going to tell you all about that, right? Also, if you've got clots, we want to know, because that means there's not enough energy, like qi and blood, getting to that sort of endometrial lining for it to form really nicely, or there's blood stagnation. So there's not a nice flow of energy and blood that is forming a nice, lovely, beautiful, spongy, even endometrial tissue. And that's what's coming out when you're seeing these clots. And so from a Chinese medicine point of view, that's blood stagnation. And again, there's herbs and there's also acupuncture that we're going to do, and we're going to give you some dietary advice around that. And that's often eating foods that are going to help kind of move the blood, and also some lifestyle tips. So they're the kind of the two big questions you're probably going to get. Also, in terms of the color, if it's darker, it's indicating a little bit of stagnation. If it's lighter, a little bit of deficiency. And so these are just the real kind of basics in terms of why we're asking you about your period. And so what you can do from a Chinese medicine point of view when you have your period is really make sure that you rest. From a Chinese medicine point of view, when you have your period, that whole area is really open and it's really vulnerable, and we don't want to create any imbalances. And so it's really important when you have your period, no high intensity exercise. So no running, no if you do weights or anything, just please abstain for at least the first couple of days, especially if you've got a heavy period. And then once, it's either a lighter period or you're right to the end, then you can start kind of coming back to some exercise, but just modifying it and bringing it down kind of a notch, maybe 70% while you've got your period. And this is going to allow what we call in Chinese medicine, a conception vessel to rebuild. And it's, day 3 of your cycle. That's when all the hormones start kind of cycling to make the new eggs and to make the new endometrial tissue. And so at that point, we want to make sure you've got a really juicy energy and blood. So it's a really good time from a Chinese medicine point of view to rest. Also, avoid anything cold, because you know how I mentioned that everything's really open and it can be quite like vulnerable to cold. So we suggest when you have your period to have nice warm baths, keep your midline, like your mid area, really super warm during the day. Like if you're in an office or something, make sure you've got like maybe a belly warmer, hot water bottles, heat packs, fantastic. And also keep your feet warm. And that's because that your feet are the very end meridian to the uterus. So if your feet are cold, then your uterus is going to be cold. And have you noticed, like when you're cold, everything gets like really tense? Well, it's the same in your body. It gets really tense and constricts. And that means there's not like juicy blood flow and juicy energy going to that area. So number one tip, keep your feet warm, keep your belly warm. Refrain from doing too much exercise. It's also a fantastic time if you're trying to conceive to have some acupuncture, and the acupuncture at that time will help try and clear if you've got any blood stagnation in the uterus. We try and kind of clear out anything. And also it's a great time. It's like kind of like you're coming back to kind of ground zero hormonally, like baseline. So it's a great time to kind of stimulate those kind of endogenous hormones in your body and get ready to build new eggs or a new egg, and also that lovely endometrial lining for that possible pregnancy in your next cycle. So that is basically it. My top tips are really just like keep warm, make sure you rest, don't have any cold drinks or food also during your period. And if you've got pain, you see a Chinese medicine practitioner, because there's some great research around how acupuncture is really helpful for dysmenorrhea, for painful periods. We see a ton of that sort of stuff at the clinic, and we'd love to help you. So reach out if you'd like any more information. But that's my top tips for your hormone health and period health. So please, I hope you've come away with some like juicy bits to help you and your fertility. Thanks so much. I'm Amy from the Acupuncture Pregnancy